At this time, it is my honor to present to you the great man we are taking pride in honoring here today, Dr. Werner von Braun.
Distinguished guests, friends from Huntsville and Madison County, I am deeply touched by your kindness and by this farewell greeting that you offer me here today. You know, it's almost exactly 20 years that I first came to Huntsville. I made a little scouting trip with a few friends from El Paso, Texas, where we were stationed at the time, to see what this Huntsville was like, where we were told a Redstone arsenal was for sale. And on the 1st of April 1950, I finally moved here with my family, which then consisted only of Maria and our oldest daughter, Iris, then I believe 2 years old. On the 1st of April 1970, exactly 20 years later, the family will now join me in Alexandria, Virginia, where we bought a new home. These 20 years were pleasant and happy years in your midst, and we shall never forget your warm hospitality and friendship. We are also keenly aware that without your generous support, we could not have built the Marshall Center, we could not have developed the Saturn vehicles so effectively, and most certainly, we could not have gotten to the moon on time. I feel a very deep breath of gratitude to the employees and the contract.
Individuals can react against
Made our space achievements of the 60s possible. I feel a great and deep debt of gratitude to the people of Huntsville and Madison County who welcomed newcomers into your midst, and to local officials and civic leaders who wrestled with all the problems of a growing community, many of the problems we ourselves, of course, apparently have generated. I've always been very deeply appreciative to the current officials who established such an effective relationship between the Marshall Center and the community, in particular Harry Rett and his Marshall Center Advisory Committee, and your Mayor, Joe Davis, and Commissioner James Record, and of course the Chamber of Commerce and the Huntsville Industrial Expansion Committee. Now I feel very strongly urged, in view of this reception again here today, to remind you once more that while there has been much publicity about my personal role in space, I would like to all remind you that this is a team effort. It always was a team effort. I thank it to the men right behind me that we got going in this program, and I thank it to all of you, contractors, Marshall employees alike, that we could accomplish what we set out to do. We have reached such a high plateau in space exploration because we, the team here at Marshall, were standing on the shoulders of all who have gone before. I would like to thank you for your unwavering and enthusiastic support of the space program. Once you received us newcomers with perhaps some amused tolerance. We were fully aware of that as those crackpot scientists who want to go to the moon. But after you found out that there was at least some seriousness in us, you soon became our most loyal supporters, and so all this became possible. I would like to thank you for the presentations and the gifts that I have received today. I don't know what touched me deeper, the painting of General Toftoy, or the many certifications, or the useful gifts like the color television set. Maybe in the long haul, the most significant of them all will be the scholarship, because it will pass the heritage on to the younger generation, that through learning it is that you step up to accomplishment. I would like to urge you to continue your support of space exploration. We think a continued national space program is a worthwhile national undertaking, and in the coming years you will see more and more practical benefits to mankind at large being realized from this program. My friends, there was dancing here in the streets of Huntsville when our first satellite orbited the Earth. And there was dancing again when the first Americans landed on the moon. I'd like to ask you, don't hang up your dancing slippers. We all realize that the first lunar landing will be a hard act to follow. There's only one moon, and I'm afraid we can't offer many more spectaculars like that in the years to come. The interest and the attention of the space program will now be turned to put all that new capability to use for Earth-related applications, for the benefit of man, for the benefit of the taxpayer and his less favorite brother in underdeveloped and hungry countries. That is what I will pay my attention to in the years to come in Washington. And I would like to finish up with a very fitting word once spoken by Osa Johnson, where he said, "If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. Just put the foundations under them."
At this time, we will have the unveiling of a marker. To my right, will Dr. and Mrs. Von Braun and their 3 children, Governor Brewer and Senator Sparkman, please go down the steps to the right. If Joe?
How you doing? Good to see you. See you in a long time. Good to see you. It's all right.
Have they pulled it
Hello,
off?
Dave.
Have they pulled it off? This plaque reads as follows. This plaque was placed here by citizens of Huntsville and Madison County, Alabama, in honor of Dr. Werner von Braun, who directed research and development operations for the Army at Redstone Arsenal from 1950 to 1960, and served as director of George C. Marshall Space Flight Center from 1960 to 1970. It was unveiled on February 24, 1970, on the occasion of his transfer to Washington, D.C. as Deputy Associate Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Dr. von Braun, whose vision and knowledge made possible the landing of the first man on the moon by the United States, contributed significantly to the life of this community. He will forever be respected and admired by his local fellow citizens. Thank all of you for being here on this great occasion.
Thus, as you just heard in the reading of the inscription on the plaque dedicated to Dr. von Braun, the man whose vision and knowledge made possible the landing of the first man on the moon by the United States, and the man who contributed significantly to the life of this community, will be forever respected and admired by his local fellow citizens. You have been witnessing live from the Madison County Courthouse Square the Wernher von Braun Day celebration in honor of the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center, or former director, rather, of the Marshall Space Flight Center, as he prepares to move to Washington to assume a major planning position with the headquarters of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. As the various speakers appeared behind them, it was interesting to note the placard which read, "Huntsville's first citizen, Dr. Wernher von Braun, on loan to Washington, D.C." Mayor Davis, who, as we noted earlier, made his second public appearance since being in the hospital, commented on Dr. von Braun as being a guiding light to the community, and that he thanked him for his services and interest in the community and its future. One of the highlights of the celebration this afternoon from the Madison County Courthouse Square, of course, was the resolution adopted by the Huntsville City Council at a special meeting at 1 p.m. this afternoon. That resolution, of course, as you recall, was read by City Council President Ken Johnson and named the new $10 million comprehensive civic center, which, of course, still is to be built, named it in honor of Dr. von Braun, calling it the Wernher von Braun Civic Center. James Record, who usually is a prolific speaker with a flair for history, kept his remarks very brief and summed up by saying he's a heck of a nice fellow. Ray Pierman, as you recall, president of the Huntsville-Madison County Chamber of Commerce, presented a series of beautiful gifts to Dr. and Mrs. von Braun, including a color television set, a grandfather clock, and 2 white chairs, and in closing asked that God's blessing be with Dr. von Braun as he takes up his new position in Washington, D.C. Major General Donnelly, the new commanding general of the U.S. Army Missile Command, presented Dr. von Braun with a portrait of General Holger N. Toftoy, the late General Toftoy, who brought Dr. von Braun and the members of his original Peenemünde V-2 rocket team to the United States under Operation Paperclip in 1945. Louis Salmon, who is president of the Huntsville Industrial Expansion Committee, was one of the next speakers, and again, this was one of the highlights of the program, as you later heard Dr. von Braun comment. Mr. Salmon announced that a scholarship had been established in honor of Dr. von Braun, and this scholarship was applicable both at the Huntsville campus of the University of Alabama and also at Alabama A&M University. A surprise visitor at this afternoon's celebration was the former commanding general of what was then the U.S. Army Ballistic Missile Agency, Major General John B. Medeiros, retired. General Medeiros said that Huntsville's loss was in reality the nation's gain. And he pointed out that von Braun's moving to Washington was putting Dr. von Braun where he can sell something and probably get the nation's space program back on the right track. He called Dr. von Braun a firm Christian and a fine imaginative individual, and that Huntsville was built from von Braun-type leadership and will continue to grow upward. Senator John Sparkman, who was kiddingly referred to as Huntsville's senior citizen, of course, Mr. Rhett corrected that afterward. He is Alabama's senior senator, offered his best wishes to Dr. von Braun and also expressed the feeling that he looked forward to working with Dr. von Braun upon the doctor's arrival in Washington. Governor Brewer coming to Huntsville in the midst of a special legislative session in Montgomery, where, of course, he is hoping that a freedom of choice law will be adopted by the Alabama legislature, patterned after New York State, noted that this was a happy occasion, that, in his words, a local boy has made good.